living for a few days. I really don't.
Yeah.
I have to think about that one.
Northeast keeps you on your toes, right? Yeah. So that'll be that. We'll talk to Ben. We'll get the latest on what's going on with the Phillies there, and Ray, of course, Ray's going to put a bow on the season, the game, the whole thing. So we'll talk to Diddy about that. But we were on the air yesterday when Nick Sirianni and Howie Roseman met with the media, and there were some interesting points, and we discussed some of it yesterday. But just to sort of have the ability to go back and reflect on some of it and dive in. So, couple things. One, I think it's pretty obvious this looks like Brian Johnson's job. But just to, go back on this. And by the way, Nick said that absolutely the offensive coordinator will call plays. It will not be him. So the Eagles are 21-5 since Nick turned over the play calling duty. Hard to argue that kind of success, right? 21-5. That's pretty significant.
Mm-hmm.
Brian Johnson's 36 years old. He's been with the Eagles the last 2 years under Sirianni and Steichen. He's been the quarterback's coach. Prior to that, he spent a year in Florida where he was the offensive coordinator. Dan Mullen did call plays too, but he certainly had a lot of influence on the offense and what that thing looked like. Barrett, I know you covered some of his games,
when he was at
ESPN work that you do.
Yeah, I did the ACC championship game. It was Virginia, Florida. And I had a chance to sit down and talk to him, interview him, the guys he had on this team. And, at the time they had some great players. They had actually, as it's funny how things go, but they actually had, what's his name? The receiver that killed us.
Kadarius Toney.
They had Kadarius Toney. They had Kyle Pitts.
The tight end.
The tight end. So he had a pretty good offense.
Yeah.
That he was working with.
And Trask had a great year that year.
Trask.
Yeah.
Emory Jones was there. I forget the Johnson. I forget his first name. He was there. But they were a great offense because it was funny how they did it. And that's why I know that Johnson is really Brian is really talented because he was able to orchestrate an offense where Kyle Trask was just a drop back quarterback. He was slow as pond water. He couldn't run. He couldn't haul ass if you told him to take 2 trips. You know what I'm saying? He's just slow. So, yeah. But he had, guys like Johnson and Jones, he would implement them in the red zone from the 20 on in. And they ran that offense, very, very well. I mean, very well, So, I knew he had the skill set to call plays because he was calling plays then. But I didn't know how good the relationship he and, both Hurts had at that time because we had no use in talking about, why would I talk about Hurts? I was talking about that team. So I didn't know anything about Hurts. And when I found out that he and Hurts were friends, and then I was able to go interview him again once he got to the Eagles and, talked about that relationship, man, I just knew it was going to be a great way in which you could really optimize Hurts' abilities because he's called those type of plays for both sets of quarterbacks.
Sure. Yeah. And he's had experience elsewhere too. He was the play caller in Houston in 2017. He was with Mississippi State as well. He was with Utah. So he's paid his dues. It's not like he just kind of popped on the scene out of nowhere.
Right. Right.
If he gets the gig, and we know there's that familiarity that he has with Jalen and with the offense in general, which I like that. I like that you're not sort of rebuilding this thing. You just keep it rolling and fine tune it. He puts his own, signature on this thing that Steichen, different from Steichen. So I think that's good. I think it's also interesting that they're looking around outside at the defensive coordinator. Maybe they're not quite as sold on Denard Wilson. I don't know if that's a shot at Denard or they like some of the other candidates who are available. Vance Johnson would be one of them. According to multiple reports. Now, Barrett, the interesting thing here is he's definitely more of an aggressor in terms of just approach. A guy like Vance Joseph is than what Jonathan Gannon was. He is definitely much more of an aggressor in terms of blitzing, and he runs a different kind of defense too.
Well, yeah, I mean, when you look at Vance, like people don't understand, Vance was a quarterback at the University of Colorado, so I know him very well. Me and him are real cool because we're also fraternity brothers.
Okay,
both he and Eric Bieniemy, when they were at Colorado, I was real good friends with him. But he played quarterback, so this is before you really had the the dual threat quarterbacks. In fact, he didn't really play much. He was just a great, phenomenal athlete.
Right.
He didn't play quarterback because he was backing up, some really good players. So he goes to the Jets, becomes a DB, and that's where he learned the trade of being a defensive guy, being on the defensive side of the ball. And he's always been a sharp dude. So long story long, he keeps progressing, So now he's a 3-4 guy. He runs a 3-4 offense, but it's not the traditional 3-4 defense. It's not the traditional 3-4 defense. Usually when you run a 3-4 defense, your three big guys that are down linemen, one lines up over the tackle, that's the end. You have a nose guard head up over the center, then you have another end line up over the tackle. And those guys usually two gap. It's not like they get up the field in one gap like our defense does in the 4-3.
Mm-hmm.
These guys would two gap, meaning they would hit the tackle, press them back, and have both gaps on either side of them. So if the ball went one way, they would go into that gap. They just had to stand there. And they really weren't used to really make impact plays. They were used to keep the linebackers clean. Hence, that's why you have, the 3-4, 3 down linemen and 4 linebackers. Linebackers were featured. So that worked, like when I was with the Steelers, we had great linebackers, James Ferrier, Larry Foote, Joey Porter on one side, James Harrison on the other side. When you have linebackers like that, well, he tends to run his a little differently. His guys don't two gaps, so his big guys don't two gaps. They still play one gap, and he allows his linebackers to take those gaps too. But they run a zone blitz. They'll totally blitz from a zone and don't have anybody to go recover from that zone. They might drop a D lineman or something like that, but they blitz all the time. And blitzing is not sending 4 people to them. Even though they have 3 defensive linemen, they're just sending a 4th guy. That's just a regular run stop or a regular gap. He just sending 4 guys. They send 5 guys, 5 to 6 guys when they blitz. That's when you know it's a blitz, when they send 5 or more. So they did a lot of blitzing, and it wasn't because they didn't have the horses up front. Hell, they had some great players up front, So, but it's just going to be a little different. It's exactly what the doctor ordered with what we want here in Philadelphia.
Yeah, and we're not going to know.
Blitzing, dominant type of aggressive defense. And he'll be just what the doctor ordered if you want a guy like that.
And that's the challenge, though, Gunner. Like, there's so many free agents. We don't know exactly what the personnel is going to look like, whoever takes this thing over, whoever is the defensive coordinator. I mean, you could see a mass exodus, whether it's CJ or Bradbury or Hargrave or Brandon Graham or Linval Joseph or Sue Cox. Like, there could be tons of these guys not here. We just don't know. Derek?
Well, that's why Howie Roseman has contingency plans in place all over the place, because you honestly don't. And once Jalen gets his money, the trickle-down effect is going to hurt a lot of people and hurt the Eagles in a lot of ways in terms of what they might want to do. And that's why I said earlier in the week, it's imperative you get a DC in place now so that you can get behind closed doors and get an idea of what kind of player they're looking for their system. If they decide not to go with Denard Wilson and go outside of the equation, your best bet is to get that guy in place and start looking at potential candidates to see how they fit your salary cap situation. Now, obviously, you can't load up with a multitude of big names again. That's not going to happen because that guy at the top is going to take up a good chunk of the money, even though you have like $20 million in cap space additionally now with the cap being increased by $20 million. It has to be very strategic because they still have to figure out what they might have to do with 1/5 or 2/5 of the offensive line as well.
Yep.
We know Jurgens is going to take over, and we assume that one of the guys in house is going to take the place of Seumalo if he leaves, but we don't know. They may try to go out and get how they like to build in the trenches. They may want to go out and get a big name offensive lineman to fill that gap as well.
Yeah.
We that's something we haven't even talked about much. But if you bring in like a Vance Joseph, a Lovie Smith, Gerard Mayo, you look at the success New England's defense has had the last couple of years, especially the linebackers. Mayo's a big part of that. Now, he's worked with a number of good defensive coaches there. So what's his ideology in terms of what a defense should look like? We know what Lovie Smith's concept is in the Tampa 2, but what makes that successful? It's a certain type of player, body structure type, speed, lateral agility, so on and so forth. So they're not going to let this thing linger long. They can't afford to.
Yeah.
You've got the combine coming up quicker than you think. So yes, Mr. Brooks.
Well, when you look at what the Eagles have, what they have up front, it's almost kind of what you would want a 3-4 defense to look like. Starting off in the middle, you got Davis there.
Mm-hmm.
It'll be perfect. He's a prototypical nose, zero technique nose that you use in the 3-4. You also have Marlon
Tuipulotu. Yep.
He's also a traditional nose sitting right there, head up over the center. The linebackers, you need stud linebackers on the outside. You got Hassan Reddick there. Mm-hmm. You got Patrick Johnson that fits that mold. Kyron Johnson also fits that mold. When you look at guys that are going to play the head up tackle over the head up ends over the nose, you got that. Josh Sweat, you got that. You could put Marlon Milton Williams there. Mm-hmm. Even Derek Barnett can play there. You know what I'm saying? So they have guys to play it. Guys that we prototypically say would be guys that you would fit in the system. Even guys that were on the practice squad that fit. Matt Leo. Now, nobody really knows who Matt Leo is. But Matt Leo is a pretty good player. He just couldn't break the lineup.
Yeah.
He's the prototypical 3-4 end because he has size on him and he's long. Mm-hmm. Those guys are usually size, built like that. He'll fit in perfectly on what they want as a 3-4 defensive end. So it's not like they don't have the players to play it. But also, a lot of these guys are versatile. They can play 4-3 if they're asked to.
Mm-hmm. Well, okay, based on what you said, and that's a good analogy in terms of the hogs they have in the trenches, then the linebacking situation in the 3-4 becomes even more imperative. Now, we don't know what Nakobe Dean is. If both Kazir White and TJ Edwards leave, you got to fill a lot of linebacking. Does Hassan Reddick become a stand-up outside linebacker instead of a guy who puts his hand in the dirt more than he stands up?
Yep.
What is he? Is he more of a hybrid? Okay, so that's a lot of linebacking to try to fill the gap, which means if Kazir White and TJ Edwards both leaves, that means that elevates the urgency of possibly taking a linebacker before they take a corner. If a D coordinator decides that he wants to go to that 3-4, because the linebackers in the 3-4 set the tone for the defense.
Well,
you got to have, you know what I mean?
You're absolutely right about that.
You've got to have, So you've got to have, in a lot of ways, your linebackers can disguise what deficiencies you might have on the back end, even. Depending on like the games they like to play in the trenches, moving the pieces around and stuff like that. That's going to be interesting. A lot of people want to see a big name. If Hargrave and Cox both left, people want to see a big name D tackle move in there. But like Barrett just said, you already have pieces in place that can fill the gaps in that regard. Mm-hmm. But you've got to be spot on when it comes to the linebackers. Even if you draft, he has to be somebody who can hit the ground running. He can't be like a Jordan Davis last year who had a wealth of talent in front of him and could ease his way into the transition of the NFL game. He's got to be a linebacker you can plug and play right out of the draft alongside Nakobe Dean, whether they decide to make Reddick a stand-up outside backer instead of putting your hand in the dirt. And you got to get another linebacker as well in there.
Yeah. Well, got it.
My fault, guy. It's like I'm talking too much, but I mean, I'm just going from the roster what I'm looking at.
Right.
And you have to look. You're absolutely right. You got Nakobe Dean. They're going to pencil him in as a star. We see that. Mm-hmm. Sean Bradley would have to step up. He's been a special teams guy, for his first 2 years in the NFL. Christian Ellis, another special teams guy. That's the extent right now that the guys that are signed that are under contract, and I keep saying under contract because I'm not going to talk about guys that are not under contract. Like I'm not going to talk about Marcus Epps, James Bradbury, CJ GJ, Kazir White, TJ Edwards, Javon Hargraves, Fletcher Cox, Ndamukong Suh, Robert Quinn, Linville Joseph. I can't talk about those guys because they're not under contract right now. I can just go by the guys under contract. That's why I mentioned Derek Barnett and what I'm talking about. But the guys under contract, the guys that will be middle linebackers, the two linebackers in this defense. And when I say middle linebacker, I mean, it'll be the Jack and the Mike. The Jack and the Mike. Then you got the Sam and the Will are the two outside guys. But the Jack and the Mike right now, I would say starting will be N'Kobe Dean and Sean Bradley. Those will be the starters. You have one backup in Christian Ellis. That's the extent of them. Everybody else that are linebackers is going to play the Sam and the Will. So that's Hassan Reddick, Patrick Johnson, and Kyron Johnson. Those are the only guys we have on the roster right now. And we're not even going to talk about the secondary. Our secondary starts like this right now. Darius Slay, he's one corner. Maddox is the slot, or he's going to be, he'll be still be the slot. But on the outside, the other guy that's next is either Zach McPherson or Josh Jobe. Everybody got pissed at me yesterday because I was talking about the guys that are signed, but that's who we have right now. Joshua Scott is the second team slot cornerback. I mean, I'm just going through what is the starting safeties right now. Reed Blankenship and Kayvon Wallace. Those are starters right now because those are the guys that are on the roster.
Yeah, I hear you. And the interesting thing is, Howie said he wouldn't be deterred with giving Jalen, the extension because of the way things went with Wentz.
Right.
And that's the way you got to operate. But I mean, you're probably looking at 45 to 50 million a year. He would have made 4.3 this year, Jalen, or is scheduled to make 4.3. Free agency starts March 12th or 13th. So, I mean, if you think about it,
2.5 weeks away.
Yeah, man, that's really quick.
Right.
So,
nature of winning, nature of being and not winning, nature of being in a Super Bowl.
Yeah, but there's just so much tied into Jalen's contract with all these free agents. They have to work on this pretty. I'm not saying they haven't already had the structure in place. They haven't been talking with Jalen's agent. I'm sure they have. Okay, and then they actually couldn't. By NFLPA rules, they couldn't extend him until this season was over. They weren't. You're not allowed to do that because he's only.
These guys are right too, man. These guys are right. They said Davion Taylor. He is a back. I forgot all about Davion Taylor.
Yeah,
he's on the roster.
That's not good. That you
there's a reason why you forgot about Davion Taylor.
Say that. The fact that you had to like, oh yeah, that's probably not a good sign.
Now keep this in mind. Keep this in mind right here on this day and this time. And remember, I told you guys this. Don't rule out the possibility they could use Darius Slay as trade bait to get more draft capital. We could see a secondary similar to what the Eagles did back in the early 2000s when they drafted Lito Shepherd and Sheldon Brown in the same draft. So don't rule out that possibility as well. So then you're talking about turnover. Can you imagine if you got two young kids playing on the corners? And then a young set of safeties as well. Oh well, CJ back there with another young safety.
Yeah.
So keep that in mind as well.
It could look very different, man. I mean, that is for sure. But there is an urgency here. Not that there wasn't already, but to get this done in relatively quick form. Now, that hasn't always been the case around the NFL. We've seen that. We heck, I mean, you think about it. Lamar Jackson's still not signed. So, right. This is not, we all think, oh, get it done. Well, it's easier said than done. It takes two to tango here, and if you look at some of the contracts, like, interestingly enough, Patrick Mahomes' contract, I think it's the last 3 years of it aren't even guaranteed. It's a pretty team-friendly deal. Now, that could mean a lot of different things. You can look at it depending on how you view it. I think he made like 35 this year or whatever. Chiefs got a pretty good deal. But the problem is, as time goes on, it only goes up and up and up. That was a few years ago now. So you're going to be comparing this to what some of the guys have signed lately, some of the guaranteed deals like Deshaun Watson got, which throws a monkey wrench into a lot of stuff. So my point is it's not easy, right? And it's not going to be easy to get it done, but you're going to have to get it done quickly so you can figure out who else you can sign. That, again, I'll be mowing this forever, but it's one of the reasons why you needed to win this one this year, because there's just going to be a lot of change. There's going to be a roster turnover. It's just the nature of the beast.
Well, let me ask you this: Would you have him sign a team friendly deal like Mahomes? Like we first heard Mahomes' deal, which was 10 years, $505 million. That's $500 million. We were thinking like, oh my God, listen to those numbers. Look at that contract. But it all has why look now with the way the numbers are going right now, when you have guys like, guys that have guaranteed contracts of, $260 million.
Right.
It's almost like he's a bargain right now. He's probably making. He's the 10th highest quarterback. I think they said he's like the 10th or 9th highest paid quarterback right now.
Yeah,
and he's the best player in the league right now. So that's tough, man. That is tough when you think about the numbers that he's got. And we know Howie. How is it? He's ingenious at getting guys under fair market value.
He is. And that's the thing. You know, we sit here right now and we talk about, oh my God, this is going to be crazy. How's he going to do this? How's he going to prioritize certain guys? How's he also going to get Jalen's deal done? But I feel like, you know, we're like banana in the tailpipe with this with Howie. Every single year we sit there and talk about how he's going to pull it off with the cap. And he always does. I mean, there's a lot of things you can debate with him, but I think he is the ultimate cap master and roster manager in terms of money. So if anybody can figure this out and still keep somewhat of the nucleus still here, it's Howie. If anybody can do this thing, you know, and the other thing is that's very much up in the air. And John Dickerson brings his name up here. You know, per Field Yates, Eagles paid Kelsey $3 million bonus yesterday. The cap impact for Philly now creates 2.4 in space. You're going to see a lot of this kind of stuff. You're going to see guys having stuff converted from their actual salary into bonuses and all that kind of stuff. So there's going to be a lot that happens between now and then. And one of the big decisions is what happens with Jason Kelsey, you know, whether or not he's back. All right, let's step aside here. And when we come back, Ray Didinger is going to join us. We'll talk all things Eagles, the Super Bowl itself, the season, put everything in perspective with Ray. 1:30, Ben Davis. Got some great NFL stuff we're going to do a little bit later. But when we come back, it will be the one and only Hall of Famer, Ray Didinger. Derek Gunn, Barrett Brooks, Rob Ellis. Sports Take on this Friday, JAKIB Sports YouTube Network. Let's talk about Jim Murray and Principal Financial Group, because knowing who to trust with your finances can be a very scary proposition. And that was my, you know, I'm here, guilty. But I can tell you from personal experience that I trust my finances with Jim Murray and Principal Financial Group, whether it's retirement planning, 401k review, insurance review. You might have a small business and you're trying to get your employee benefits off the ground. That's another resource that Jim can help you with. I personally entrusted my IRA, my 401k rollover with Jim, and I couldn't be any happier. You will be too. Give him a call, 610-996-4751, 610-996-4751. You could email him as well, Murray, MURRAY, .jim@principal.com. That's Murray.jim@principal.com.